I'm behind the wheel of the Porsche Taycan. I'm not going to say Porsche all that much because, as I've discovered in the 10 or 15 minutes or so that I've been driving this car so far, when I randomly say Porsche, about half the time the car thinks I'm talking to it, and then its artificial intelligent assistant, whatever you want to call it, asks me what I want.
Can I help you? The phone is connected through another function and is therefore not available. Please repeat your entry.
I'm having an existential crisis.
What did you say?
I said the world is pointless.
I could not understand you.
I'm not going to spend this video making comparisons to the Tesla Model S. And there's a really good reason for that. The Tesla Model S is a very different car to this vehicle. And I think it's about time that we don't compare cars to Tesla just because Tesla was first in the space. I think it's really important that we start comparing this car to other vehicles from the same manufacturer, because this is this particular company's first electric vehicle, but also that we compare it to other similarly priced luxury premium models. And to be honest, the Tesla Model S is a whole lot cheaper than this. You could buy a fully kitted out Tesla Model S P100D, or long range performance as they call it now, and not have any worries about having any spare cash at the end of it. Even though it's a mid-spec, it's still incredibly quick. 3 seconds sprint times, 3.2 seconds for this vehicle from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour. And you're looking at 2.8 seconds for the Turbo S. This is a high-tech car. There are 1, 2, 3 distinct screens in this vehicle, and there is a 4th optional screen available that you can spec when you order your car to give your passenger effectively an iPad in the car that they can play with. They can access some of the telematics, they can play with the music selection, etc., etc. And the idea is that it's away from your gaze, so you can concentrate on the driving and your passenger gets to concentrate on entertaining, which I think is a rather good idea, and several different automakers are doing it. It's just not in this particular car. The other thing that strikes me when I'm sitting behind the wheel of the Taycan is how low you're sat to the ground. And when I saw this car as the Mission E, I did think it was kind of a big vehicle. It felt a lot bigger than other vehicles from the Porsche family. But actually you're sitting pretty low to the ground, and the riding position is not far off what you'd get if you happen to have a 911. A lot of high-performance sports cars are not great in traffic. They're uncomfortable, they don't feel great. Obviously they're not so easy to control because they've got an internal combustion engine. Like any electric car, the Taycan does away with all of that because it's got that smooth power delivery from the get-go. And the other fun thing about the Taycan is that, you know, if you want to, when you put your foot down, it picks up almost instantaneously. Obviously, the thing you don't have that you have with other Porsches is the engine noise. And in the cabin, it's very quiet and very serene. I've had a little listen to the radio. The audio system, as you would expect, is a premium audio system. Very, very nice, very good high end, very good reproduction of sound. And the sound deadening in this car does a great job of cocooning you from the outside world, but not so much that you are out of touch with what's going on outside of the vehicle. And that's a really important thing if you're considering a driver's car. So you're looking for a high-end premium luxury car, we're talking the Rolls-Royces of the world. Sound deadening from the outside is utmost importance. You want to drive along or ride along, hopefully if someone's driving you, and not be able to even hear what's going on in the outside world. The Taycan's level of sound deadening and dampening is just right. I can hear everything else that's going on outside, but it's not so loud and so intrusive that I would have to shout above everybody else to be heard if there was somebody sitting in the front passenger seat next to me. This West Coast Taycan press launch is the first time that Porsche has let US journalists get behind the wheel of the Taycan for extended periods of time on their own. unlike a lot of press events where you end up pairing and sharing the car with someone else, Porsche's actually given every single journalist on this press launch their own car for the day, which gives you a much better ability to see what this car feels like and what it would be like to live with this car on a daily basis. This morning's driving, I'm not going to lie to you, has been a little bit boring. It's going to be freeway driving pretty much until our lunch stop, and then after our lunch stop we're going to get some twisties and we're going to have a go then at pushing the car a little bit harder and seeing how it responds. But in freeway driving mode, the Taycan has been extremely well behaved. The chassis, the handling of this car in a freeway setting has been wonderful. It's been really, really clean in its performance. There's been nothing really that's made me go, ooh, this doesn't feel right. And like every other Porsche on the market, the driver is the center of the universe. It's not about the passengers. It's not about the infotainment system. It's not even about kind of autonomous driving or driver assistance features. This is a driver's car, and you feel very much in control at all times. I'm not going to go over the usual stuff that you're going to find in a Porsche, like the memory seats and, you know, all of the adjustability, because that's standard to any Porsche. And I'm hoping if you're watching this, you know that Porsches come with a high level of customization and a high premium quality interior trim. There is nothing about this car that makes me think that anybody has tried to cut corners. And why should I feel like that? Well, I shouldn't, because this is a Porsche, and Porsche doesn't do that. It doesn't cut corners with its cars. The digital infotainment system that you have on the Taycan is really nice. It's similar to some of the other infotainment systems that you'd find on other Porsches. Obviously, this one has an emphasis on the electric side of things. But unlike a lot of electric cars where your range and your power and everything is front and center, it's just an extra page in the Taycan. Right now, I've got the map in front of me in the driver pod, as I'll call it, with the speed limit. I know how fast I'm going. I know what my directions are. There are 4 different modes that you can use with the Taycan. So I'm using it in range mode. In range mode, the top speed is limited to 70 miles an hour in normal driving. But if I put my foot down suddenly, it goes above 70. You know, it allows you to accelerate out of trouble. And that's really nice, because a lot of car companies that do end up putting those range or those eco modes, you end up with a restriction on what your car can do, and you don't realize maybe that it's restricted until it's too late. But with the Taycan, that power is there. If you push your right foot to the floor, the car will respond, and it is quick. And we're talking 500 kilowatts. It's quick. So you've got the range mode, which obviously is designed to maximize range. In range mode right now, it's predicting that we've got 186 miles of range remaining. We've probably done about 40 or 50 miles so far today. So we switch into normal mode. Normal mode is what you would normally use with the car. It's what the car defaults to. And in normal mode, it's giving me 182 miles of range remaining. And, you know, that's not a huge difference. It seems reasonable enough to me. If we then switch into sport mode firms up the suspension, it hunkers the car down a little bit, it makes the steering feel a little more sporty, and in that mode it gives you access to the full power of the car. You've got 177 miles of range. After sport, you have the Sport Plus mode. And Sport Plus mode is kind of balls to the wall, full performance, as you would want if you were going to go on a track or whatever. And in that mode, I've got 170 miles of range remaining, which is still, you know, pretty damn good as far as I can tell. Now, I should also note that in the Sport Plus mode, you do have a lower suspension setting. It firms up the steering even more, and when it's needed, the spoiler on the back activates to give you a really hunkered down, gripping the road performance that is less focused on efficiency and more focused on just that driving, that high performance driving experience. And a lot of people have been asking me about the range of the Taycan because it's not as great as some of the other cars on the market. And yes, you're right, it doesn't have the longest range of any electric car on sale today, and that's okay, because as we'll find out later on, the Taycan comes with 800 volt charging as standard. Now I'm going to explain the charging a little later on, because I think it's really important to get our head around why Porsche is doing what it's doing with charging. But the too long didn't read at this point in the review is that with that 800 volt charging, you are going to be able to charge the car really quickly at an 800 volt charging station. Now, they are kind of rare at the moment. There are some more coming to market. But at that high power charging station, you're going to be able to fill up the car reasonably quickly. And you're not going to really have to worry about necessarily needing to have that really long range. It's more about having the performance available for the entirety of the vehicle's range, and then you stop and you charge for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then you're back on the road again. And right now, 170 miles is eminently okay. I would argue that any car that does more than about 200 miles per charge is just fine for most people to drive. When I left the hotel, it was 240, I think it was. So already we have made a dent in the range. The car is still doing just fine. I drive electric cars most of the time. In fact, the number of times I've driven an internal combustion engine car this year, I could count on one hand, and we're halfway through November. But if you're new to electric vehicles, what will hit you is how quiet the cabin is of the Taycan. And some people like that, I personally do. Some people don't and want more feedback telling them how fast they're going. And the Taycan has a little trick up its sleeve because it's got this thing called electric sports sound, which is currently active. And if I put my foot down, you'll hear that noise kick in. It's really addictive. It's like a jet engine mixed with an electric motor sound. There are hints of internal combustion engine in there to keep your internal combustion engine fans happy. But I just love the sound, and it's piped into the cabin so you can hear it at all times. Listen. It's that really raw. I like it. I love that sound. I didn't think I would, because I like my electric cars to be quiet, but I really like that sound. Now, when I'm driving, I really like that feedback. It's a good indication of how hard I'm pushing the car and how fast I'm going. But my criticism is that if you have that electric sports sound activated, when you're stopped at traffic lights, stoplights, whatever you want to call them, the car sits there and throbs. Of course, if you're going to be spending a lot of money on a high-end electric car, you're going to want to make sure it's got all of the assistance features that you would expect. And this has Porsche's InnoDrive system, being a Porsche, obviously, and it seems to work just fine. I've got it active right now. It's set to the speed limit, 70 miles an hour, and it's making sure that I'm staying in my lane. I can take my hands off the steering wheel and the car will steer itself, but just like any other semi-autonomous driving feature, it warns you pretty quickly to put your hands back on the steering wheel, and if you keep your hands off the wheel for extended periods of time, the system is going to get very angry with you. So you should consider the InnoDrive system as essentially just a way of making sure that you don't screw up when you're behind the wheel. It's not a system to drive for you, it's a system to assist your driving. And that makes total sense, because this is definitely a driver's car rather than a gadget person's car. You know that there are other choices on the market if you are heavily into your gadgets and you really want to have a car that will do 90% of the driving for you. The Taycan is not for you. If you want to do all of the driving, or at least most of the driving, but have technology just to help you out in case, something goes wrong, then the InnoDrive system is definitely what you want. It's not overbearing. I still feel in control. I've got a little extra feedback from the car as I'm driving along, and you can override it. I'm currently traveling a little faster than I'd set the speed limit, but if I take my foot off the throttle, it will just go back to the previously set speed. So all is well and happy. Of course, I should point out here that InnoDrive is a level 2 system. It's not a level 5 or anything like that. So we're now heading out on the Angel's Crest Highway, and this is where things are going to get fun for this car, because Porsche has chosen this route explicitly because it's a twisty, fun mountain road. Now, I've currently got 110 miles of range remaining, and we've been told that if we can get to the charging station with as low a state of charge as possible, we'll be able to experience the really high power charging rate. So that's going to be my goal, to try and make it to the charging station with the lowest possible state of charge. So let's see if we can do that. So now we're out on Highway 2 in California. I figure it's a good chance for us to talk about regenerative braking, because these mountain roads do call for a lot of regenerative braking, at least in a traditional electric car sense. Regenerative braking allows you to recapture the kinetic energy of movement and store it back into the battery pack as electrical energy, or actually chemical energy, that your car can then use for future use. Unlike most electric cars on the market, which use some kind of single pedal driving, or at least semi single pedal driving, the Taycan doesn't. It behaves very much like an internal combustion engined car. And when you're driving it along, you have to use the brake pedal as well as the accelerator to control your speed. Now, some electric cars obviously on the market, they have modes that allow you to brake and accelerate with just your accelerator, and can actually bring the car to a complete standstill. Some cars it's software baked, so you can tweak it. Other cars it's just as standard, and other cars use paddle shifters. The Taycan doesn't have any of that. It does have a regenerative braking button on the steering wheel, and what that does is it does dial in just a little, tiny little bit of simulated engine braking, but it's certainly nothing to slow you down to the point where you're not going to have to use the brake. Does the Taycan have regenerative braking? Sure it does. It's just activated from the brake pedal. It's not activated by lifting off the accelerator. The regenerative braking on the brake is very responsive. It seems to work just fine, and I'm not worried about the car losing control or anything like that. I'm not driving this super fast through here. I'm giving it a little bit of beans. I don't know the road and I don't know the car, so I'm driving a little bit more steadily than I might if I knew the road really well. But in terms of handling and regenerative braking, the Taycan is just rewarding me every single corner. It's egging me to go on. And the nice thing about the seats on the Taycan is it really, really hugs you. And I'm, let's face it, I'm not a small person. You know, I'm overweight. I know I'm overweight. And I still fit into the seat, which is very different to a lot of sports cars on the market, where if you're, you know, not a supermodel, you're not going to fit. The view is absolutely epic. Little bit of tire squeal there, and the car is doing everything right. It's just egging me to go faster and faster, just turning into the corners, and there is that lovely torque vectoring, the four-wheel steer, very active, and the car is just so planted. I wouldn't want to do this in certain other cars. Someone was asking me earlier on, what do I think about the Taycan? How does it compare to some other high-performance sports cars? And already, I can tell you, this is a car worthy of the Porsche name. And the car is just gripping, 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 gripping. It's not giving up. And I'm really pushing the car to its absolute limits. I'm pushing the tires to its absolute limits, and the car is still responding. It's fantastic. Just to give you an idea of how much this car is egging me on, I'm actually switching to 2-foot driving. So I've got 1 foot on the brake and 1 foot on the accelerator, because honestly, this car is just wanting more and more and more. I am speechless. Wow. And I tell you, the brakes on this car are crazy. They are very good at stopping, and it says do not pass. I don't think we're going to have any problems about passing. Let's see how we can do. I'm going to really push it through this corner, and I could live and drive this car every single freaking day. Oh my goodness. You just tighten it up and it just responds with every single corner. Wow. So how does a Taycan handle on these twisty roads? You could lose your license very, very, very quickly. But you'd have a big grin on your face at the same time. You know, I've got to say, if I was driving a Tesla along here, I wouldn't feel quite as relaxed as I do in the Porsche, because the brakes on this Porsche are insane. The car is just giving me absolutely everything it possibly can. It's gripping. It's giving me feedback. It's dialed in. This is not an electric car that you're going to go and get your shopping in. This is an electric car with spirit, with drive. It's most definitely a Porsche. And some people would say, yeah, but you'd want to drive this with a gearbox and you want to be able to thread yourself through the gears and feel the car as it's coming around the mountain. And I'll tell you something very, very important. This is leaving me breathless. And there are very few cars that leave me breathless. And if you are a driver's driver, you need to get behind the wheel of this now. This car is breaking the laws of physics. It is just crazy. Yeah, physics laws have been broken. I hope I'm looking disheveled, because I feel disheveled in ways that you probably wouldn't know yet. I am having such an amazing time with this car. It is crazy. It just keeps giving and giving and giving. This is a crazy car. Oh, what's this? Oh, so apparently my car has decided that there are no fast charging stations near its destination. So, yeah, I think I may have driven it too fast. Whoops. We've had several people ask about the usable, drivable range of the Taycan, and Porsche does quote a range of different figures depending on how you're driving. This car, the Turbo, which is what I'm driving, has a better fuel efficiency than the Turbo S. It doesn't have quite as much power. It is a little bit more aerodynamic because it doesn't have to have the extra vents up front for cooling, which is something that the Taycan Turbo S has to have. And so you can go a little bit further per charge. I think 220 to 250 miles is eminently achievable as long as you don't drive like an absolute hoonigan. I have driven like an absolute hoonigan over the last hour, and although the car said, you know, we had 140 miles when we pulled up for lunch, it's now saying 81, although admittedly I drove up a mountain rather quickly. Because the Taycan has four-wheel drive, it's got all the right torque in all the right places. You go around one of these corners quickly and the car figures out where it needs to send the power. There's even a little meter in the dash that allows you to see where the car is sending power, which I think is kind of cute. And it reinforces the idea that while the Taycan is an all-wheel drive car, most of the hard work is done at the rear, and the front wheels help out when required. So strangely, when we do a press launch normally with an electric car, there's a consciousness that you try and arrive with as much charge as possible. Porsche actively told us to arrive with as little charge as possible, and that's because the Taycan has a 350 kilowatt capable charger. At the moment it's charging at 270 kilowatts, but we are here at a 350 kilowatt capable CCS quick charging station. That's 800 volts, 350 kilowatts, and the car itself is going to take up to 270 kilowatts of charging. So what we're going to do is we're going to swipe on the app here to start charging. Then I'm going to grab one of these big old hefty, huge cables. I've used them hundreds of times before with other cars, but this is the first time we've ever used it with a car like the Taycan, so let's see if it works. And there we go, it is now starting to think about charging. We've hit 40%, so we've added 20% of state of charge in 5 minutes, which is absolutely crazy. We did briefly hit 200 kilowatts instantaneous charging power. We're now at 151 kilowatts, which is still blisteringly fast. And that's made possible because the Taycan is an 800 volt car. So it's got 800 volts on the main battery pack. Both the motors, all of the power electronics operate at 800 volts. You can charge at home using a very fancy charging station that comes with the car. And you can plug that into a NEMA outlet. You can plug it into whatever your local power outlet happens to be. And much like the Tesla mobile connector, you'll be able to buy different charging adapters for your Taycan. A lot of people have been questioning why the Taycan charges at 50 kilowatts when it's using a standard 400 volt DC quick charging station, which is the norm in most parts of the world right now. A CCS 50 kilowatt 400 volt charging station. It can only charge at 50 kilowatts because in order to charge at a higher level of power at 400 volts, it needs to have additional onboard DC to DC conversion. And Porsche has decided to make that an optional extra rather than include it as standard because it's an extra piece of hardware that would otherwise not be needed. And Porsche believes the future is 800 volts rather than 400 volts. So it's designed the entire Taycan drivetrain to operate at 800 volts, which is what's possible to charge at such insanely high speeds as we're witnessing here today. But it does mean that 400 volt charging is restricted to 50 kilowatts, which is a bit of a shame, but you can add an extra 150 kilowatt compatibility. You just have to add some extra bits and bobs into the car, which of course increases the price, but it's not a huge increase in price when you're already spending $150,000+. So a lot of people want to know why it's so expensive to charge a Porsche Taycan at something like an Electrify America charging station, and the reality is because of the power levels being delivered. Now, Electrify America, like a lot of charging station manufacturers and networks around the world, actually has a tiered charging system, but most cars on the market today that aren't Teslas are using between 50 and 100 kilowatts. And so most people are paying either the 50 kilowatt rate and below or the 100 kilowatt rate and below. The Taycan is capable of charging it up to 270 kilowatts at the moment. Higher speed charging will come in the future. And what that means is when you plug into a Electrify America charging station, you are paying 99 cents per minute of charging, which is why for 10 minutes of charging here at this Electrify America 350 kilowatt charging station, we've already paid $10.92. But for that, we have added, wait for it, 30 kilowatt hours of energy into our battery packs. So in 10 minutes, we've put more energy into the battery pack than you would be able to put in, say, a 2012 or 2013 Nissan Leaf. We have put in half of the capacity of my Chevrolet Bolt EV. And the reason why you have to pay more is because utility companies don't like it when a customer suddenly starts pulling a high amount of electricity. And there are things called demand charges, surge charges, they're called in some parts of the world. And they are charges that utility companies levy to commercial customers when a commercial customer suddenly goes from using a certain amount of energy to a much higher amount of energy. It's much harder for the utility companies to prepare for those random peaks in demand. And that's one of the reasons why Electrify America and other charging networks charges so much for these super high charging rates. But to be honest, if I am in a hurry and I am driving a Porsche Taycan and I want to get, and maybe another 150 miles down the road, and I have to just stop for 10 minutes to refuel, that's less time than it takes me to go to the bathroom and grab a coffee. And the car's already full and ready for the next part of the journey. And that is a revolutionary thing for electric vehicles, especially if you are an existing electric car owner who's used to spending anything from half an hour to an hour waiting for your car to charge every 200 to 300 miles. So we are just about done here. So I am going to jump back in the car. We'll head back to the hotel and I'll give you my final thoughts about the Porsche Taycan Turbo. So what do I think of the Taycan? Well, it's one expensive car, but then all Porsches are expensive in one way or another. And this is a car that is equally at home on the freeway in commuter traffic as it is on twisty mountain passes, and I presume the racetrack, at least by the way it's been going lately. Just look at how it handles this curve. It's allowing me to go in. You look for the exit, you just keep dialing it in. The car is just staying really solidly stuck to where it needs to be. And it just goes around the corner. It's like threading a needle. It is beautiful. Should you buy a Taycan? Well, let's face it. If you can afford one, then the chances are you're probably already really keen on having a test drive. And you certainly should. But for most people, this car is going to remain way out of reach. However, this car proves, I think, once and for all, that the Volkswagen Group, of which Porsche is a part of, is deadly serious about electric vehicles. This is not a compliance car. This is not a limited production, high-end electric car that you're only going to see, a couple of hundred models sell. This is a car I think is going to sell in volume. It's going to sell in volume, especially in its home country of Germany, because it's a car that's been engineered to sustain high speeds for as long as the battery pack has charge. That's very different to some other electric cars out there, which are capable of high speed, but do overheat after a fashion. This car hasn't shown any signs of wanting to give up, and I've driven it hard, and I've asked a lot of it, and it's still giving me more and more and more. When I first drove the Tesla Roadster, I thought, this is a car that is going to be hard to beat. And over the years, Tesla has beaten the Tesla Roadster by bringing out higher performance vehicles. And now Tesla is synonymous with high performance electric vehicles. The Taycan doesn't beat Tesla in any measurable way. They're both equally good, but they're equally good at different things. The Model S, the Model X, the Model 3, they're all great on the advanced technology, the nuts and the bolts of an electric vehicle with autonomous driving, with all of these advanced safety features. But if you are somebody who wants a driver's car for driving, the Taycan is hard to beat. I'm sure at some point there will be cars that will absolutely spank the Taycan on the drag strip. And, that's okay. The Taycan is not a car that is going to win all races. But you know what? Oh, wow. It is crazy fast. And earlier on, I was driving really hard. I was driving really fast. I don't mind admitting that. And I was driving within my limits. I was driving towards the edge of the car's limits. And it felt good. It really did. It felt crazy good.